Hi, this is Kavanagh-Thomas and welcome to the Self-Love Greenlight. This is for everything self-love and self-care when in business. So this is for you, the businessman or woman, who's going through an incredible business journey, and we know what it's like, the hardships, the stresses, the strains and everything. And we also equally know what it's like to adopt self-care and self-love and self-acceptance practices into our business as well, to make it better for us as we flow through, and to make it easier on you and your life, so you're able to enjoy the time with your friends, family and your clients and yourself as well. So today we have the beautiful Debi Richens. Debi Richens is highly regarded for her personal transformation coaching, mentoring, education, work in trauma, PTSD, grief and loss. She's also been helping me as well through grief and loss at this moment in time, especially with my mum. She is particularly interested in parental alienation. I know many people have been through that. Grandparent alienation and estrangement. She has a firm belief that everyone should be afforded a voice and be heard, and often they need hand-holding to feel safe enough to have that voice. The founder of the Soul Phoenix, Debi, has lived years and has years of experience with supporting others. In her personal life, she has experienced complex childhood and life-changing bereavements of a brother-in-law, then later 3 generations of the same side of the family. This caused huge disruption in her marriage, which ended in divorce after 20 years. Along the way, she has dealt with severe health issues and 2 near-death experiences, as well as losing her only child to parental alienation. She found the journey of becoming a divorcee, an alienated parent, extremely isolating emotionally and financially, and has worked through many challenges in rebuilding her life. And you certainly have gone through rebuilding your life to where we have met, because we met through Caroline Sylvia Ragg, who's an international marketing and strategic marketing extraordinaire, I'm going to say, who was also coming on this show. We met during one of her programs called Rev Up. We met on one of her marketing programs, and we became firmly connected since then. And we've both worked with each other in different ways. And I have to say, it has been incredible so far working with you, and especially for even a deep time in my own personal life as well. And I cannot believe you're here. It's very last minute today, but it was meant to be. So thank you for coming and welcome.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Let's start off with the first thing was parental alienation, because we know that many people are out there right at this moment, who are struggling, maybe with the relationship with their kids, and that can be very hard and very difficult to navigate, because there's going to be 2 people, and 2 people have a story each, and they're clashing. Share with us, a little bit about that, because there's a lot of trauma.
So, the thing about parental alienation is it is an adult having control. Some people term it a form of coercive control, childhood coercive control, because they ultimately have the say about what happens about a child and how they live their lives. So when a marital relationship or a long-term close emotional relationship breaks down, there's often a lot of anger, a lot of upset, a lot of spite, and people will do and say things that are dredged up from their unconscious mind and won't really know why they're doing it, but they will become aggressive and unpleasant towards the person who is no longer living in the family home, whether that be the mother or the father.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they cause a lot of damage to the relationship between the child and that absent parent. It can be fueled by court and often is fueled by family court. It's not a nice place to be. And the very nature of how it all works, children lose their voices rather than have their voices heard, because the mother or the father will say that the child doesn't want to see the parent, doesn't want to spend time with the parent, hates the grandparents, hates the parent, hates the aunts and uncles, and all of these excuses. But equally on the way, they will also be dropping little seeds of discontent in their children by saying, well, it's your father's fault because he hasn't paid for. It's your mother's fault because she was never here, especially if she's had to go to work because they've had to keep the house afloat. And many, many other very spurious comments that are very, very degrading and destructive. And, children are very influenced by what their immediate carer says. And so if they think they're needing to protect mummy or needing to protect daddy, they will actually toe the parent's line without even realizing they're doing it. And they will toe that line in court. They will toe that line through CAFCAS, which is the Children's Social Services. And they will toe that line with anybody else who they think they need to be telling, their teachers, and other therapists, etc., etc. So the damage can be very widespread. And children will repeat things when they're young that they don't realize it's not really a child's terminology. But for the professionals, it's a very fine line as to how you can actually prove that damage is being done, unless it is so blatantly obvious. And in a lot of cases, the undermining has been done for a long time. And so it's not so blatantly obvious. For me, I was trying to work and trying to live whilst trying to work out what was going on and not understanding any of it. And to this day, it's nearly 18 years since this all started for me. To this day, I still don't understand the involvement of the people that all added their voices to protect, so they say, my daughter. We had a very happy, healthy relationship with all the normal family stuff that goes on. Yes, there was underlying stuff because I didn't understand the underlying unconscious stuff that I'd brought into my adult life from my own childhood. Yeah. I didn't know what it was that was running my patterns, but I certainly didn't deserve to be treated the way I was, and neither did my daughter, and neither do the majority of parents and children that go through this. If there's real harmful abuse, sexual abuse, drugs, or violence, that's a very different matter. But 9 times out of 10, none of those things exist. And it is just sheer spite. And when you're trying to work and run a business or work in someone else's business, it makes it much harder for you to focus, to be engaged, to be either earning your self-employed wage or earning your paid wage. It causes mental health issues that are insurmountable at times, and it causes physical health issues. There is this massive gut-brain connection where when our brains are in turmoil, so are our stomachs, and we have constant stomach issues. So you can't work effectively because you're not 100% there because of the trauma that you're going through with this family breakdown.
And that is so true that, you hit a real great point. And this is why it is very important that this gets actually spoken about, because it does have an impact. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with us when these things impact us, because we're human and we go through adverse times. And this is why we need to speak about this, and especially speak about it from a person who's had experience of this as well, and why you have brought your work to the forefront to make sure that people are getting the help that they need going through these transitional times, because they are transitional times, they are. And they are very traumatic in terms of personal relationships as well. Share with me how loss in particular works in these situations.
So with loss, you know, the first thing I want to say is actually that GPs just don't understand. You know, even with a death, they just don't understand the depth of how many layers you experience with that loss. And it's the same with family breakdown. They tend to want to tell you you're depressed and feed you a pile of pills, which actually doesn't do the job. It literally just creates a sticking plaster. And for years and years, I was told I was depressed. And actually, I was in very deep grief for the loss of my relationship with my only child, for the loss and breakdown of the relationship of the marriage, for the loss of the relationships with the family members who I'd been so close to for so many years and were my family, for the loss of the community that I lived in because I had to move away to financially survive, for the loss of my personal friendships that I couldn't afford to sustain just by walking down the road and sharing a cup of tea, because I had to move quite a distance away to live, to survive financially. But also for the loss of the new relationships I was making within my work. I worked in a dental practice at the time, and I was in deep grief, and literally any mention of my daughter or the situation I was in turned a hell of a waterfall on, not just a tap, it was a waterfall. I could not control the tears because I was in such deep grief. I didn't know how to express myself. You know, and the losses just kept coming and coming and coming. There were the breakdowns of the relationships with the mothers of my daughter's friends, the mothers who had been my friends, who didn't quite know how to deal with things they were being told. I really believe, but my daughter was right under their nose, as was my ex-husband, and I was nowhere to be seen. But that was my self-preservation. You know, my self-preservation was I needed to be alive for my daughter. I needed to be well for my daughter. And I couldn't do that being within that sphere of emotion and other people's interference. So it becomes really less easy to stay in that. And so the losses are multiple. They're not just one or two little things, they are multiple layers. And a massive one for me was isolation. Self-value, self-worth, self-esteem. You know, I suddenly became less than a parent. Yeah. And yet I had been the only parent because he didn't really involve himself in family stuff as such, you know, so little holidays and things to my brother at the coast, that was my job, you know, and we went. And we didn't really do family stuff because sadly, after his brother's death, he started drinking. And drinking became more important, you know, and he was dealing with his grief and his trauma, but it was a weapon in our lives, you know, and it caused a lot of damage. So all those different losses, you know, the intangible losses are the ones that people don't see. The self-value, the self-worth, the self-esteem, the isolation, the financial. People think they see the financial, but actually they don't. Finances are like the roots of a tree, and they go an awful long way. And the impact of that can be huge. Yeah. I mean, for me, I ended up isolated in one room in a shared house in Newbury. And I literally, my life just stopped, you know, from being able to just wander down the road to see a friend and have a cup of tea, to literally being stuck in the house and taking myself for walks because that's all I could do. I didn't know anyone. So there was that isolation that actually is hugely damaging to you.
It is hugely damaging as well. So what birthed what you do now? What brought this about? How was this?
Well, it's so interesting, isn't it? I've been networking for many, many years through self-employment, and I met a lady in Swindon, networking in Swindon, who was talking about a program called Grief Recovery. And she knew my story, you know, and we had a bit of a chat. But at the time, obviously, I wasn't earning anything from the business I was running. Everything I was earning was going back into the business. And I was a paid carer. So I didn't have the money to spend on it. And so I sort of parked it in the back of my mind and thought, okay, you know, it'll come. And it came on the back of a car accident. And when I had the financial payout from the car accident, which I hadn't been expecting, I just looked at it. In fact, it was the barrister who said to me, so what are you going to do with this money? And I just blurted out, I'm going to go and train as a grief recovery specialist. And he said, that's amazing. What's that? So I told him, and he said, that really is amazing. He said, go do it. So I did. I booked it up, I paid for it, and off I went to Cambridgeshire. And in 4 days, my life just changed, because I learnt the depths of compassion for myself that I realized I never knew. And part of that was truly learning about how forgiveness works and the scientific background behind it. And that became the base of where I am now. Many years on, I'd also done brain trauma work because I really wanted to understand what was happening to myself, as well as the people that I was surrounded by that were in this thing. I learned more about suicide. I learned more about mental health, and I went off and did the Mental Health Foundation course, and then became an IACT therapist as well. So I've got all these things, and I thought, no, that's not quite enough. I need a bit more than this, because the subject of grief is so vast. It is like a whirlpool. It's deep, and it goes far, far further than just looking at the initial grief. So I took myself off and I did my NLP and hypnotherapy timeline training. And so I have a really lovely wealth of tools now that I use for when I'm working with my clients. Because, as I always say, grief is not just about death. Grief is about every loss that we experience that does not have the expected outcome.
Wow.
And for me, you know, this loss of my daughter, there is a hope that one day she will realize the influence, the overexerted influence that was used on her at 14 years old. And she might realize how she's used that influence in her own children's lives. She has a daughter of 8 and another one coming up to 5. And hopefully she will have the courage to reach out rather than keep this impenetrable wall that she's built. Because in my mind, the only way to break this is to welcome with compassion. The only way to break this is to be loving and understanding and open, and to be able to forgive, which I have done, because I can see both sides of her story, and it's not all her.
And I think, you know, there is, when people are going through this, there's a lot of, it's very complex. There's not, as you mentioned, there's not just one emotion going on, there's many, all at the same time. There's a lot of layers to it. And it's amazing how you've gone out there and you've actively sought out the, you know, the training and the qualifications, and, you know, and really delve. Not only have you gone through it, you've delved into it as well. And what I want to share with the audience as well, because obviously they may be able to hear it in your voice, but and they may be able to, if they watch the YouTube video, they will be able to see that there is still, you know, that feeling there, you know, because we're human. And this is, you know, something that we, you know, we need to see as human beings, that sometimes grief lasts for a long time, you know. And even though we still have incredible moments, and I'm sure, you know, you have incredible moments, there are still moments where it's going to come up, you know. There are still moments where it is felt. And the reason why I wanted to share this is because we don't have to pack this away. We don't have to,
absolutely
know,
not.
And I think that's what you've kind of like really taught me, is that we don't have to pack this away, because if it's packed away, it becomes overwhelming and it builds up to, yeah.
So, the thing about grief is there is no expiration date. And this notion that time heals, it doesn't. It's a bit like how long is a piece of string, you know. Nobody can say, so nobody can tell you it's time you stopped grieving, because actually grief is an infinite part of who we are and how we grow. It's around us all the time. It's around us when our dog dies, when the rabbit dies, when, you know, when the pet mouse dies. We still grieve all those things, and we are still reminded by images, by sounds, by smells, many, many years later.
Yeah.
You know, and so that impact in our lives, we learn how to live with the grief. We don't learn how to expel and get rid of the grief, because you can't. It becomes an intrinsic part of you and how you move forward. And so it's almost like a tool that you use to take another step forward in your life.
Yeah.
But those sights, sounds, smells, colors, you know, children's laughter. For many years, I had to cross the road because I couldn't walk past young children. And I, you know, the supermarket, I'd walk into an aisle and there'd be, you know, a mum and her daughter, and I'd just turn around and go the other way, because I couldn't actually cope with accidentally overhearing that conversation about, well, what are we going to cook tonight? Because something that simple was enough to churn my insides upside down.
And isn't this, you know, even just having this conversation now, I do personally believe that whoever's listening to this needs to really listen to this, because it's actually, you know, it's almost like a conversation to say to people, you're not on your own. Yeah. You're not on your own at this moment in time. And that you can, as you said, you can utilize this for, you know, what you've done essentially, Debbie, is utilize it for great in the world, you know, utilize it to help other people. And you can really clearly see why your, you know, your work has gone into creating that confidence from heartbreak. Because that's what it is. It's utilizing the moment that you've gone through and utilizing it to, you know, create a life, you know, create a life that is better. You know, as I say better, that might be quite a flippant word, but create, you know, create a life that you can still enjoy, or have moments of enjoyment. That's what I want to use, moments of enjoyment, you know, through the stuff that is actually happening to you. And that's what was really important, even in my own, you know, even in my own journey after mum dying, that it was important to still create this business and be very consistent and share, you know, an incredible podcast and get great people on here to, you know, if it, you know, it wasn't for, you know, coaching for you, or, you know, all the stuff that, you know, that I've done, this wouldn't be coming together. Do you see what I mean? Because these are the
Absolutely.
things that help us continue and help us help other people through situations. And that's why this is, you know, a great conversation to have. I would really like to know, especially before we go, what tips would you have for people who have either, let's start with tips for someone who was just at the cusp of this. They've just gone through this. You know, maybe their marriage is broken down, maybe their child, you know, relationship with their children's broken down. When they've, you know, when they first stepped into that realm, because there's a lot of people. I mean, I think I saw a post of someone yesterday who's just recently had a breakdown or something. So what tip would you give for that person?
So the very first thing I would suggest would be that they take a moment for themselves, just to breathe, and just to really think about what they actually want in life, and start to recognize actually whatever traumas or experiences they may have had in their own young lives that could now be adding to how they are reacting rather than responding to what is happening at that present moment.
Wow.
You know, the other really important factor, because it really needs to be two-sided, is to remember that their children may not be speaking for themselves, because they may be fearing that they will upset mummy or daddy who they are living with, and they don't want to be told of and live in that place of fear. And so the things that they may be saying, that they may be repeating, may not be their own views. So don't judge your children on what you're experiencing, especially your teenage children, because they are a breed all on their own, teenagers. You know, everything is going on for them, hormones and, you know, the expectations of the world, making them want to grow up too fast and step out into the adult world. Social media has it all going on. So you really have a battle on your hands. So take that step back and don't judge them. Yeah. Don't label them with any kind of label, you know, because it just causes more limiting beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. And what tip would you have for someone, say they've already gone through it, but now it's, you know, a little bit further down the line, but they're finding that they are stuck in that situation, you know, and they're still running, you know, their business and everything, but they just feel stuck and they can't get out of this like continual.
So my recommendation would be that they have a chat with somebody like me who can help them to explore the experiences they had in their childhood in a very safe way, and actually help them to understand the limiting beliefs and decisions that they created in their childhood minds that they really don't recognize, because most of us don't recognize them. That's why they're limiting beliefs. You know, and it's all well and good somebody telling you, oh, well, as soon as you find those, you'll be okay. But if you don't know what they are, how on earth will you ever, you know? So it's about being guided to discover them, and then learn about how you articulate how you actually feel about that experience or that event that happened in your young life, and how it's playing out in your adult life. It's really vital, because, you know, we all have those experiences. They can be very simple experiences, but they can become very big things in our adult life without us even realizing.
Agreed. I just want to thank you for coming on today. Just to recap, Debi went through her story of parental alienation and also divorce as well. She also spoke about, you know, children, sometimes it's not their views that is actually coming from them. She also spoke about, you know, how you can, you know, essentially utilize this heaviness, this grief, to move forward. And then she's provided us with some tips for if it's just happened to you, and tips for those who are a bit further along but are just feeling really stuck in this continual cycle of grief. I just want to thank Debi for being on today, because it's been an absolute pleasure. It was a real last minute thing. It wasn't meant to happen today, but it did. And you know, and it was definitely manifested for Debi to be here. Just to let you know where you can find Debi as well. So you can find Debi at the Soul Phoenix. Is it the Soul Phoenix on Facebook as well?
Yes.
The Soul Phoenix on Facebook. What is it on Instagram?
It's Debi the Soul Phoenix.
Debi the Soul Phoenix on Instagram.
Yeah. And Debi Richens the Soul Phoenix on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Brilliant. And what we'll do is we'll also pop her link below, which will also contain all of her links within there. So you can find her and you can delve into how she can help you and how she can help you move through your business in a really loving way. I just want to thank Debi for being here today. And
thank you.
No worries. And thank you everyone for listening to the Self-Love Greenlight this week. Thank you very much, and we'll be back soon with another incredible episode with another incredible business person to help you with self-care and self-love within your business. Speak soon.